This system is what we call an ACCU-Slide Double Back. The reasoning for this system is because of how narrow the room is and how deep the room is. We require longer cables that, instead of them being routed to an adjustment bracket at the end of the chain, they're routed through these double back pulleys, and the adjustments are made at the corner pulley bracket. So to start, we will remove these plastic Z dividers to expose all the pulleys and adjustments. When adjusting an ACCU-Slide, we want the room to be fully extended in the out position to be able to have access to all of our adjustments. In this case, we are readjusting the room because it's not quite sealing in the out position. What we consider a seal is when these standoff brackets make contact with the aluminum extrusion. And at the top, we're making contact because the weight of the room is going to force the top out. And also the weight of the room is always going to fight the bottom to come in. As you can see right here, this interior bottom standoff bracket is about a ½ inch away from sealing. So before we adjust, the first thing we want to do is identify which cables do what. With the double back, when the room is fully extended, these double back pulleys that are closest to the motors always have the out cables routed through them. If you follow these out cables to the corner pulley bracket, the top cable in that set will always be for your bottom corner. Your bottom cable is always going to be for your top corner, where the cables are routed to. The pulleys that are furthest away from the motor are going to be your end cables. Those are your exterior cables that pull the room in. So in order to force this room out, the first thing we're going to want to do is loosen the end cables to keep them from pulling against us while we're adjusting the room out. So I'm going to try loosening up the chain on both sides, because by loosening the chain, you're loosening up both of the cables at the same time. One thing to keep in mind is that this bolt here for the chain adjustment is 2½ inches long. So once you get about 2 inches of thread exposed here, you want to be mindful that you don't want to disconnect this adjustment nut from the chain adjustment. We just want the end cables to be visually sagging to know that they're not pulling against us. So I'm going to loosen the ends on this side as well. Then from here, we're going to identify our out bottom cable. Like I said before, these pulleys that are closest to the motor, those have our out cables routed to it. If you follow the cables to the adjustment bracket, the corner pulley bracket, our top cable is for our bottom corner. So I'm going to grab this cable on the bottom portion of the routing here, because if you pull on it at the top, you risk bending an adjustment point at the cable, which can make this job a lot harder. If you bend it too much, you'll be forced to replace the entire cable. So anyhow, I'm going to pull it from here to prevent any bending or damage to the threaded end of the cable. And by pulling on it, it's going to force the room out. With the room out, I'm going to set tension on that out bottom cable. Always going to clamp onto the sleeve of the cable while I'm adjusting it with my 3/8 wrench to keep this cable from spinning while I'm wrenching on it. As far as tension goes, I'm going to tighten this cable until that bottom corner stays in the out position. And a good way to verify that is by, again, pulling on this out bottom cable. And if that adjustment or that standoff bracket moves, then we know it's not tight enough. Now that we have the bottom corner sealed, we're going to try to match the tension with our out top cable. So the cable we were tightening before was our out bottom. We're going to see if we match the tension just by simply pushing on the cable at the adjustment bracket. Right here you can see that the out bottom is pretty darn tight. This out top is considerably looser than that out bottom. So we're going to tighten that out top until we match tension of that out bottom. close. I'll put the anti-vibration foam block back on, and then once our outs are sealed and our chain lock nut is in place with our chain adjustment on the out cables, we're going to set tension on the ends. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to start by tightening the chain back to where it was before. When tightening the chain, what you want to be mindful of is this adjustment bolt poking all the way through this adjustment nut. The reason for that is once this starts to poke through there, you're not going to be able to get the box end of your wrench out. So you'll need to get another wrench in order to loosen it up again to get your wrench out of the bracket. Once the ends start to feel a little snug, I'm going to lock that chain nut into place. And I'm going to make sure that this bracket's locked in straight up and down with the face of the chain. If I can loosen this jam nut by hand, it's not tight enough. Then from there, I'm going to go to the cables and I'm going to compare the tension of my outs with the tension of my ends. The best way I could describe this inside the unit is that your outs are going to be tight, banjo tight. Your ends are going to feel spongy. But to confirm the tension of your ends being correct, we're going to have to go outside of the RV and feel the tension of the exterior screws. Now I'm going to repeat the same process on this side. Fortunately, this side is still sealing, so I'm just going to do some fine tuning of this side more than anything. So I'm just going to feel the tension of my out cables, which again are the pulleys closest to the motor, follow them to the corner pulley bracket. My top cable is going to be for my out bottom. The one directly beneath it's going to be for my out top. Right now the tension on them are pretty darn tight because the motor's torqued down on them as tight as it can go. With the room sealed and with these two cables being evenly tensioned, I'm going to set the tension of the end cables to where we'll finish the adjustment. I'm tightening this right back to where it was before, where the jam nut was in place. And I'm going to adjust this chain to where the face of this pulley bracket will match the face of the chain. Again, I'm going to make sure that the jam nut's locked in by trying to loosen it up by hand. Since I can't, I know it's tight enough. From here, we're going to step outside of the RV and check the tension of the exterior cables. The way we're going to verify the tension of the exterior cables is by grabbing each individual cable with these two fingers. We should be able to easily grab this cable with these two fingers, be able to easily lift it up a ½ inch, push it down a ½ inch from center. All 4 exterior cables should be tensioned to that spec. The final step to a double back is making sure that we put the Z dividers back into place. The purpose of these Z dividers is to divide these bulky pulley brackets and keep them from colliding with each other. So as I put this into place, what I want to make sure is that I'm covering the pin on this side and we're covering the pulleys on this side. That way there's no way that this adjustment bracket will come off of the Z divider and collide with the Z divider itself. Once I have it in place, I'm going to secure it with 3 to 4 screws up against the wall. Without the Z dividers, there's nothing that keeps these double back pulleys from colliding with each other. So it's really important to make sure that they're installed and they're installed properly. Here I'm getting in between these cables. Getting hung up on the pin, there we go. Again, we're going to secure it with 3 to 4 screws. One thing to note is that with these ACCU-Slides, if you have a good out seal and your end cables are tensioned properly, the room will mirror itself whenever you run the slide room in and have a good seal on the exterior.